Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining our town hall today, Leading Through Crisis, a town hall with California's immigrant advocates. On behalf of the Latino Community Foundation, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today on a very important and timely topic. I don't have to tell anybody on this Zoom that on January 20th, the world changed when it comes to immigration and immigration policy, and also for many of the lives affected by that policy. The mission of the Latino Community Foundation is to unleash the civic and economic power of Latinas and Latinos. A large part of our community, of course, are immigrant families and mixed status families who are very much impacted by the changes in immigration approach and policy since January 20th. There's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of concern, and people getting caught up into the deportation system right now. In anticipation of this, the Latino Community Foundation in December, after November's election, put out 6 strategic capacity grants to different organizations in the state of California that are doing work in the immigration space. Immigrant rights advocates doing direct services work and advocacy to help ensure that they have some of the resources that they need to meet the moment. Today's webinar, today's town hall, is about hearing from the leaders of those organizations. What are they seeing on the ground? What are they seeing in the lives of the people impacted? What are they seeing and feeling as organizational leaders who are in charge of trying to meet this moment? How is it impacting their work? And what do they need for our audience that includes advocates, other nonprofit leaders and funders? How is it that we can be the best allies in this moment to help ensure that these organizations that we're proud to call partners or grantees are able to do their jobs as effectively as possible when the people that all of us serve desperately need it? I'm excited about this conversation because I think a key takeaway is going to be knowledge of how we can do better in this moment. Before we begin, though, I want to just thank in advance the LCF team, which has done a great job of putting this webinar together, of the organizations that are participating, and I'll introduce our panelists in just a second, and also say that California has a long and distinguished track record as being at the vanguard of immigrant advocacy. From the days of responding to Proposition 187 to ensuring that undocumented immigrants in California could avail themselves of a number of different services, basic services in government, there is no question that the state of California has led the way. And so this conversation today is about how can the state lead the way going forward. Before we get started, though, to ensure that our webinar is as accessible as possible to the greatest number of people, we're going to have Reina Rodriguez provide some instructions for individuals that require Spanish language interpretation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Castro. Muy buenos días a todos. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give the instructions first in Spanish and then in English because today we will all get to join language accessibility. En un momento se va a encender un icono que parece un mundo abajo de su pantalla. Cuando el icono aparezca en su pantalla, esto quiere decir que se ha activado la interpretación. Cuando usted mire el icono del mundo, si usted necesita escuchar esta presentación o prefiere escucharla en español, va a seleccionar español. Después va a silenciar el audio original para que de esta manera no escuche un eco. Y con eso estaremos listos para escuchar la presentación completamente en su lenguaje. For anybody who is a monolingual English-only speaker, we will have a presentation that will be presented in Spanish. So we also invite you to do the following. In a moment, we will activate interpretation. In a moment, you will see a world like icon at the bottom of your screen. We invite you to select the world like icon. Once you select it, you're going to click English and you will be good to go. Everything else will be business as usual. But when we do have the Spanish presentation, you will be able to hear it in real time. If anybody is on a cell phone, the options are a little different. You will actually need to select the three dots that indicate more. Once you select the three dots, you scroll a little bit upward, select language interpretation, and click English, and we will be good. Para los que están usando un celular, sus opciones sí son diferentes. Usted va a necesitar seleccionar los tres puntitos en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dicen More o más opciones. Después de seleccionar más opciones, va a deslizar un poco hacia arriba, va a seleccionar interpretación del lenguaje, selecciona español, silencia el audio original y estaremos listos para continuar. Back to you, Mr. Castro. We can go ahead and turn on interpretation too.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Ms. Rodriguez. And I hope that those who are needed are able to avail themselves of the Spanish language translation. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists today, who lead a number of fantastic organizations that are doing impactful work throughout the state of California. Our first panelist is Luz Gallegos, the Executive Director of TODEC. Luz and her group serve several areas, including the Riverside area, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Imperial counties. She's no stranger to LCF. She's been, Luz and TODEC have been great partners for LCF for a number of years. TODEC empowers disenfranchised immigrant communities through access to immigration legal services, community education, advocacy, and civic engagement. Thank you, Luz, for joining us. Next, we have Jesus Martinez. Jesus is the Executive Director of Central Valley Immigration Integration Collaborative. Their service area is California's Central Valley. And CIVIC works to integrate immigrants into local communities by providing high-quality immigration services, mobilizing resources, and doing advocacy on immigrant rights. Thank you, Jesus, for joining us. Our next panelist is Erika Pinheiro. She's the Executive Director of Otro, Lado. And their service area is at the U.S.-Mexico border around Tijuana. A few months ago, LCF had the opportunity to visit the border and to see the work of Otro Lado. They're great partners to LCF and doing really impactful work. Otro Lado offers holistic legal and humanitarian support to refugees, to deportees, and migrants.
Recording in progress.
We're focused on individual representation and family reunification. Thank you, Erika, for joining us. And finally, we have Mayra Barragan-O'Brien. She is the Mental Health Senior Manager for Immigrants Rising. Immigrants Rising is a national organization that's focused on undocumented individuals, and they provide, among other things, the opportunity for undocumented individuals to pursue education and careers. And also they provide essential mental health support and resources, which we know, of course, are just tremendously important, especially at a moment of tremendous anxiety right now. And so thank you, Mayra, thank you, Erika, Jesus, and Luz, for joining us. We also have wanted to include a fifth panelist. One of our other grantees wanted to share their thoughts today, but did not feel completely comfortable given the climate that we're in, appearing on video or directly being on camera and testifying to what's happening. And so for that reason, we have a statement that is going to be read by Eduardo Garcia, our policy director at LCF. And I'll turn it over to Eduardo for that.
Thank you so much. La expectativa de vida para una mujer transgénero de color es de solo 35 años. La transfobia ha sido una pandemia que ha existido por mucho tiempo y esta administración la está exacerbando aún más. A nivel nacional hay más de 500 propuestas de ley que están procurando atacar la salud y la seguridad de personas trans, intersex y de género diverso en todas las esferas de la vida. Estos intentos de erradicación de la comunidad trans, especialmente la comunidad trans latina migrante, han unido aún más a nuestra comunidad para cuidar, proteger y enfrentar estas olas de violencia. Nuestra organización lleva 32 años levantando las voces de las personas trans. Nuestra labor es holística. No solo vemos la identidad, sino la persona en su totalidad. Ofrecemos refugio temporal y centralizamos servicios para garantizar que las personas translatinas e inmigrantes tengan acceso a recursos esenciales. Estamos en el epicentro de dos identidades atacadas, la transgénero y la migrante. Este trabajo lo hemos hecho por décadas, respondiendo con compasión e inclusión. Nuestra resistencia no sería posible sin financiamiento. Sin financiamiento estamos poniendo en riesgo a nuestra comunidad. El papel filantrópico es crucial. Los fondos gubernamentales ya no existen para estos grupos, por lo que el apoyo filantrópico es esencial para asegurar los derechos básicos. $1 puede hacer la diferencia, pero no es suficiente si no hay compromiso continuo, especialmente cuando hablamos de la población más marginalizada y violentada, aún dentro de la comunidad latina migrante. Estamos al borde de cerrar programas y despedir personal, mientras las necesidades siguen creciendo, no solo en California, sino en todo el país. Gracias por su apoyo constante. Juntos podemos hacer la diferencia.
Thank you, Eduardo, for reading that statement, which I think is an important reflection on where we're at and speaks to a lot of the concern, the anxiety, the fear also that is out there right now, but also I think, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss this, the determination to do right by our immigrant communities. And Luz, I want to start with you. You and I, we had an opportunity to visit last year and went and saw some of the work that TODEC is doing with immigrant communities. You have a tremendous amount of experience, and you've seen different waves of anti-immigrant sentiment and the impact that that has on individuals and families. What are you seeing right now, and what are you seeing that is different, that concerns you, that maybe you hadn't seen before or seen it more intensely now than before?
Thank you, Julian, and thank you also for the opportunity. I want to start saying that it hasn't even been a month of this administration being in power, and it really feels it feels like 4 years that they're at the end of the term, and it's been very heavy. You know, what we have seen through history has given us the opportunity to prepare. I know we started doing organizing a strategy or strategizing way before election day, because we know history has taught us that we need to be prepared for anything. TODEC, we organize in the border region of the Southern California. So in reality, Border Patrol lives in our streets, in our communities. But what has been different during this era has been the messaging, the messaging that continues to create fear and uncertainty amongst our community, because arrests and deportations have always existed with every single administration, regardless of parties. But what we see that really has been impacting our community is the messaging, mass deportations of hate, and really criminalizing our immigrant community, that in reality, if they migrate to our country, it's because they're looking for better opportunities for their jobs and for their kids and their families. So through our work, really early on, we started organizing and with Know Your Rights, educating our community, because that's our Constitution has kept us sane during every single time in history. And it's the law of the land, and that's what we tell community. But what we are seeing on the ground through our work, working 7 days a week since election day, literally not only supporting community, but our partners, our clinics, our county, our schools, because everybody is feeling. What we see is a comunidad enquebrantada, a community that's broken, families living with uncertainty, trauma, fearing the unknown. We tell community our intention is not to create more fear than what our community is living, but we have to prepare for the worst. We see students not attending school sites. We see clinics sharing that their appointments are being canceled on the daily basis. We see immigrants opting out of important state laws that we were able to pass here in the state of California, like Medi-Cal expansion. We see business suffering. We see workers at times not going to work due to false alarms that there's immigration raids or stops in their community. And this is crucial for an undocumented worker, because we know if they don't work, they don't eat, they don't have access to unemployment benefits, they don't have access to any safety net program. The only safety net program that we have in the state of California is full scope Medi-Cal. And at this time, we are hearing from our county partners, we're hearing from community, that community is opting out and asking the state, how are they keeping their data? We see families packing up and moving back to their home countries, getting ready for the worst. We hear from companies calling us and sharing that sometimes at times their cuadrillas haven't showed up to work because of raids, being false alarms, and community has to do what they need to do to stay safe. We continue to hear other companies, telling us that they need workers, that they need workforce, that they're hiring. But those and some of these companies that we know that live in the work or in the Inland Empire are warehouses. A lot of them do e-verify. So even the workforce that wants to work, they can't work in these companies. So what we see is for us that we work off compassion and heart. And because we come from these communities, we know the struggle. It's about the human being. But for others, it's about their bottom line. And with everything I shared, our country, our state is going to get hit if we don't continue stepping up and protecting and providing dignity to our workforce, especially to workers, to our undocumented workers that all they want to do is work and have their family safe and their school and their kids going on and on with their education. So, there's a lot to share, Julian, but at this time, we are feeling the pain. We are also feeling the uncertainty for many of us that are putting our lives on the line for our community with groups that are emboldened to act on their hate.
Thank you for sharing that, Luz. And Jesus, I want to pick up on something that Luz mentioned, which I think probably everybody on the Zoom would share, which is the fear that is out there, the disruption to the daily lives of immigrants. You're in the Central Valley. The Central Valley, among other things, just as the Inland Empire is steeped in part in logistics, Central Valley is steeped in agriculture. What are y'all seeing on your end when it comes to the ability of immigrants to continue to provide for themselves and their families, and also this issue of their children getting an education?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, Julian, and the Latino Community Foundation team. We value this invitation to participate in this webinar. Civic works in the Central Valley, and as you mentioned, Julian, like the Inland Empire and the Central Coast, these are regions of the state of California where there has been historically underinvestment in the capacity building for organizations that serve immigrants with different types of services, particularly immigration legal services. We have in the region approximately 900,000 immigrants, the majority Latinos, and at least 500,000 children with at least one parent who is immigrant. So we're talking about a population, mixed status families of about 1.5 million people in 8 counties, from Kern County to San Joaquin up in the north, and Fresno is more or less in the center. But we actually began to hear from attorneys in December of an increase in the number of people that were being detained and deported from the Central Valley. This did not happen just in January when Trump arrived. And the raids that took place in Kern County actually took place before Trump arrived to the White House. So this was an ongoing process that was already in place, that was being carried out by immigration authorities. What we have seen since there in terms of the impact on immigrant families, as soon as the raids took place in Kern County, there was widespread fear throughout the Central Valley, all kinds of different reports taking place of views that people were reporting of ICE agents or Border Patrol agents in different settings, in public settings, in workplaces, going near the orchards where, for example, citrus were being picked. So that is something that was ongoing. We also saw, among other things, kids also walking out of schools in recent days to protest these ICE raids. We also saw the mobilization of immigrant communities with protests and marches in some of the major streets in the area of Fresno and also other communities. So there's both the implementation of these deportation and arrests of immigrant families. There's the mobilization of community members that also want to defend and respect the rights. In terms of the impact on the work that we do, what we saw since the election in November, also a dramatic increase in the number of people that were going to the immigration legal services workshops that we offer. We went from 50, 60 in average to having over 100 people to having over 200 in some events. So that overwhelms the capacity that civic and partner organizations have to provide services to those family members. That is an important issue that we also need to address. The situation in terms of legal capacity has improved in this region, but is still inadequate as it is in the Central Valley, in the Inland Empire, and the Central Coast. We need to improve the overall organizational capacity in order to serve family members. So I'll stop there because I know we have limited time for each segment.
Yeah, and hopefully I want to get back to that point. I want to ask everybody sort of what the needs of your organizations and similar efforts are out there that you see in these gaps and these critical resources. But Erika, you have kind of a unique vantage point of all of us on the Zoom because your organization is doing its work there at the border and seeing the concerns on both sides. I remember we, as I mentioned, had an opportunity to visit down there in Tijuana a few months ago, and at that time, of course, you have people that are waiting to have their asylum meetings, and that was taken away. What are you seeing right now in terms of where people are going, what they're doing at the border, and then just generally beyond that, on the American side, do you see any evidence that people are beginning to self-deport, which in many ways I think is one of the aims of the fear and the anxiety that's been created out there?
So thanks so much for having me today. I'm really happy to be part of this conversation, although the subject matter is, of course, very serious. So with respect to folks who are seeking protection in the United States, Julian, as you mentioned, a lot of them had been waiting for up to a year in Mexico for an appointment to present themselves at the port of entry. On January 20th, all of those appointments were canceled. So our team was there at the port of entry. A few hundred people showed up, mostly non-Mexican, who had appointments to present themselves and go through the legal process of seeking asylum, just to find that those appointments were canceled and they were stranded in Tijuana, which is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. So as we were waiting with them, trying to get additional information, Mexican authorities came and said if they didn't leave, they would be deported back to their home countries from Mexico. So now we have thousands of people who had been trying to do things the right way and literally waiting in a line who are now stranded. They can't leave the border. Those who travel to the border, many don't qualify for asylum in Mexico anymore because you have to apply within 30 days of entry, and they've been waiting for this opportunity to enter the United States for over a year or up to a year. So right now we're just trying to work with folks to give them the information they need to figure out what their next steps are going to be. And unfortunately, pathways to protection in the United States have been completely closed off by the Trump administration. Another thing we're seeing, of course, are deportations. You know, there's all this talk of mass deportations. Obviously, we've seen increased enforcement, but the number of people actually being deported to Mexico has not increased significantly. We have been coordinating with the Mexican government, who thankfully has, for the first time I've ever seen since I've been working on the border, has actually put resources into caring for the deported population, which is a really positive first step. But we are talking to people who were picked up in raids, were picked up because ICE went and knocked on their door. Especially for Mexicans, we are seeing that in California, Border Patrol is conducting a lot of the enforcement actions. And when Border Patrol detains folks, they generally don't have access to an attorney. And most Mexicans we've talked to have just been forced to sign their own deportation without ever talking to a lawyer, even if they would have had a defense against deportation. So a few hours after being picked up, they're dropped in Mexico. Most of them have US citizen spouses or children that they've left behind. Many are the primary breadwinners, so their families are left really struggling to support themselves in California. And, you know, as much as we try to support them to reintegrate into Mexico, a lot of them do take the chance to cross back because they want to be with their families. They want to be with their children. So it's really traumatic. It's a traumatic moment when someone is deported, especially if it happened very quickly. And so we really just try to stand in solidarity with them and offer the resources that we can, but ultimately just give the information that they need to either make the decision to try to go back. And right now there's very few legal pathways to do so, or try to help their families migrate to Mexico to rejoin them there. And just on the US side, I mean, I can echo what Jesus and Luz mentioned, that the fear in communities is real. You know, I think there's some new enforcement actions happening, but a lot of what's being publicized are things that have happened for years, but because of the way it's being sensationalized, people are afraid to go to school, to go to work, and are really hungry for information. And so we're also on the US side of the border trying to provide that along with legal representation and litigating, of course, where we need to, where we feel that the laws are being violated by the Trump administration.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And Mayra, all of this fear, this anxiety, all of the worry that's being created, of course, has an impact on mental health. And availing oneself of mental health services, that's often hard for anybody, no matter their circumstances in life, and even more so for these very vulnerable individuals and families. What are y'all seeing when it comes to mental health right now at this time of dire anxiety and crisis? And this will segue into the next part of our conversation. You know, what are y'all doing about it? What is the response to that? What is a much more intense need right now?
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. And I love Jesus, Erika, Luz, your input has been amazing. And so I see what you all are seeing. And here at Immigrants Rising, we provide different types of services for our community members. And some of them are at a national level. But I want to take a step back and really emphasize that there are approximately 11 million undocumented immigrants in the US. And historically, they've been facing academic, economic, professional, and social barriers, and all of them have an impact in our mental health. And of course, this mass deportation agenda is inflicting fear and therefore impacting our mental health. And something that I also want to mention that we are seeing is how powerful we are. Because yes, there is fear, but there's also power within ourselves, power within our communities, power within our organizations, and the leaders within our organizations. For example, with Immigrants Rising, most of our staff is directly impacted because we're all immigrants. We are either undocumented or formerly undocumented. We are part of the LGBTQI+ communities. We are Black, Indigenous folks, and us leading this work. So at the same time that even though we're directly impacted, we're also finding that power within ourselves, within our community, and we're leading this work. So I want to also emphasize that there's, again, so much power within ourselves, so much hope within ourselves. There's so much that we are doing, not just the leaders, but also everybody in the community. And we want to emphasize that. Some of the services that we provide is not just mental health, but we're also trying to have this holistic approach in which we are hoping that our community members are not just surviving, but thriving. And how do we do this? We provide educational resources for community members and for educators who serve students. We provide economic mobility resources. We have entrepreneurship resources that we know that financial stability has an impact in our mental health. We know that we have these wellness support groups that are at a national level. Even though they're not therapy groups, they can be therapeutic because they're led by mental health providers, and everybody in the nation can join. We also provide one-on-one pro bono services for undocumented students in the state of California. We also have a career program because we understand the importance of having a cultural sensitive therapist. So because in the state of California is one of those 8 states that allow fully undocumented immigrants to get professional license, we have a mental health career program that allows undocumented mental health providers who are accumulating their 3,000 hours to become licensed to serve the undocumented community while they're serving the undocumented community while they're accumulating their hours. They're getting a stipend, they're getting support, supervision. So I just want to emphasize that there are so many resources. There's so much that we're doing. And I want to invite folks to reach out to us because we are here for you. Whether it's, Jesus, Ileana, Luz, myself, and everybody else at Immigrants Rising, we're here for you. We're not powerless, even though it sometimes feels like that. And we are here to support.
Thank you for that, Mayra. And touching on this question of your organizations, what you're going through right now, we're interested, and I think philanthropy is interested in better understanding what the needs of our organizations are. And I would just start off that conversation, Luz, with a question about what is the biggest adjustment that y'all have had to make at TODEC, and where do you see the need organizationally the most right now?
Through adjustment, I want to say that, through COVID, we learned that we have to be ready for anything, right? And also just the history of the Inland Empire in the Coachella Valley that as it relates to immigration, we're a border region. So immigration lives in our streets, right? And we've learned to live with that, and how to protect our community. But what is different now and how we are adjusting is through organizing. Empowering community with education, right? With legal services, with our hotline that's receiving 100 calls a day of reports of immigration in their communities. And through hope, bringing hope to our community, but at the same time, being aware of what's happening so we could be nimble and adjust and shift as we need to. Every day is a different day, and that's how we're taking it, right? I think we build the muscle through the pandemic, and the pandemic is not over. It's going to continue with the crisis that we're living in. But what I do want to say as it relates to what organizations like TODEC and the compañeros here, we have to be ready for anything. We shift, right? We have to shift with community and the needs that are constantly changing. Policies are constantly changing, executive orders are constantly changing, but we need to be ready for anything. And that's why with this opportunity to speak with those that have power of money, I want to ask for philanthropy to shift with us and to trust us. I mean, we're on the ground, our teams are on the ground, we're doing the work 7 days a week, sometimes without sleep, but we have to be there. We have to use our privilege to help those that don't have the same privilege that we do, because it's personal. We also ask philanthropy to be bold. To support with general operating funds that are multi-year, and support with capacity of our organizations, just how the compañero said, legal services, our attorneys, our legal staff, we're every day we're working, and it's going to be like this, we expect, for the next 4 years. We need to continue building the capacity of the groups like ours that are responding to crisis and will continue to respond to crisis. We want philanthropy to be conscious that crucial funding other crucial funding has been disrupted, and for them to be conscious of that, especially at the federal level. We asked for the release of restrictions on existing restricted funds. We need unrestricted money, so we're able to shift and pivot as we need to on the daily basis. Also, to eliminate and simplify administrative asks from nonprofits, reports, right now the work is on the ground. Sometimes, and this is very real. It's very real that, the crisis is on the ground with community. So that's why, I'm an advocate about philanthropy. If we're a trusted source and a partner, let us lead with compassion and heart. And that's because right now what's needed is being on the ground with community so we could address their needs. Again, simplify forms, including grant writing reports. Right now we hear from other partners that rely heavily on federal funding, and some other funding has been delayed. And it's money that they need to get reimbursed. So what we're asking for philanthropy to consider giving 0% loans to nonprofits to fill in the gaps of these situations that we expect to continue. And again, don't generalize organizations. We all lead differently. We all organize in different regions that have different needs. So it's not one size fits all. Every organization is different. So it's very important that philanthropy has these conversations, especially when they're putting out programmatic funding, that they really consider letting us lead with hope and faith and power, because it's about community, and right now it's about being nimble and being able to shift as needed. And most importantly, to be an advocate with us. We want philanthropy to continue to step up with us and to understand what community's going through, so they could also be part of the advocacy efforts.
Thank you for that, Luz. And I love your message about being bold during this time and standing with you as an ally and fellow advocates. And Jesus, I know you mentioned this a little bit, and so just want you to expand on this. Where are the gaps at? And what do we need to see more investment in? And same question there as I asked to Luz, what else do you think that philanthropy should be thinking about and doing when it comes to supporting immigrants' rights and organizations in this moment?
Up first, I'll start by saying veto to everything that Luz said.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to emphasize that we see the same challenges as she's identifying. CVVIIC provides two major services to immigrant families here in the Central Valley, but we also have another major audience, which is the partner organizations that we work with. CVVIIC was created to help immigrant families, but to also help strengthen the regional organizational capacity. So we work both with immigrants and with partner organizations. With immigrants, we provide free immigration legal services, and we also provide free entrepreneurship training opportunities. It's something that we began to do also with Immigrants Rising. They actually offered the very first entrepreneurship class that we provided here in the Central Valley during the pandemic, as a way of providing opportunities so that vulnerable immigrant families could have another way of generating income. So that has been ongoing, it has grown. We have seen the tremendous need that exists. And with the current policies that are going to lead and are leading to people losing their jobs, or the possibility of losing their jobs down the line, it becomes more important to create opportunities for self-employment and entrepreneurship as an opportunity, as a way of maintaining some type of lifestyle, and perhaps also achieving some type of socioeconomic mobility if possible. With immigration legal services and community know your rights presentations, we've been overwhelmed, as mentioned previously, by the demand that exists, both to provide the services and also to get to go and do presentations in different communities about know your rights and other such things. And we're not the only ones that are finding those challenges. Partner organizations that we work with, our nonprofit legal service providers in the Central Valley, they all emphasize in different meetings, different settings that we have had, that they, to begin with, they are overwhelmed already. They are working at capacity even before all these raids have taken place. So we are trying to provide services and assistance beyond what the organizations are actually capable of doing. So that's a very important point to highlight. One other thing in terms of the work that we do here in the Central Valley, we organize training opportunities, we organize meetings with partner organizations. Once a year, we also organize a regional conference on immigrant integration, We schedule it this time for the 25th of February. Usually it takes us several weeks to fill the capacity. This time, it took us a little bit over a week and a half to have the venue filled due to the interest that exists among organizations in coming together and participating, collaborating. And we've been invited to different forums, different settings, different sets of partnerships that have emerged of organizations and individuals willing to come together and to work. So for us, it's also very inspiring to see so many more organizations wanting to become part of this effort to defend and protect immigrant families in the Central Valley. We may be under-resourced, we may be working with far less capacity than we should have, but what we find in the Central Valley, in Fresno and other communities, is a great willingness on the part of many organizations to come together, to work together, to help immigrant families in the way that we can, individually and collectively.
Thank you for that. Erika, my question is similar in terms of what do you see for the needs of your organization, organizations like yours, but also if you can talk about I know when we went down to visit y'all and saw the work that you're doing, I mean, you work with some particularly vulnerable communities down there and individuals. Talk to us about any special needs that you see for particularly vulnerable people, families, folks that may have family on one side of the border and are on the other side. What are the gaps when it comes to the work directly there on the border?
So I think for my organization and a lot of other legal service organizations, we do have a lot of federal funding that is at risk. So about a quarter of our budget is federal funding. We already received a stop work order for our legal orientation program at the ICE detention facility near Calexico, California. Thankfully, the work has been restarted, but I don't expect it to continue. And I think for the other programs that we have that are federally funded, they are on the chopping block. Thankfully, the state of California has stepped up, allocated some more funds that we're right now applying for, but it's not going to fill that gap completely. And so I think philanthropy really does need to play an important role, or I've already seen a lot of organizations laying folks off, and so we are at a time where the work that we're doing is needed more than ever, but we are under an enormous resource strain because of the instability of our federal funding and the proportion of our budget that is supported by federal funding. So just on the US side, I wanted to mention, again, the Imperial Valley. So that's where we have our legal orientation program. The raids that Jesus spoke about were actually carried out by the El Campo Sector Border Patrol. And when they picked up everyone in Kern County, they brought them to Calexico, where they were detained before they were deported. So we really need to maintain our presence in that detention facility. Thankfully, they have given us permission to do so, even if the federal funding is cut, but we're going to need to pay for that somehow. And again, having an attorney tell you whether or not you have a defense against deportation is absolutely essential before you agree to be deported, because you are not coming back legally in most cases after you are in your home country. Another thing I want to mention about Imperial in particular is right now it's the only place in California that I've seen that has a really large undocumented population that doesn't have a rapid response hotline set up. We're working in coalition with TODEC, a couple other organizations, well, a lot of other organizations right now, to set up a rapid response network there, to set up a hotline, to set up a legal response. We have an office in Calexico and are looking to expand there. But I want to mention too, there are Border Patrol checkpoints all around that community. People cannot leave to get legal help. We need to bring it to them in Imperial Valley. I know it's the same for Coachella and other places in California, especially now that there's more enforcement everywhere. And just with the border stuff, yeah, we're working with medically vulnerable folks. We do a lot of work with the LGBTQ community, especially trans migrants who are now stuck on the Mexican side of the border. We work with linguistically isolated migrants, a lot of Haitians and extracontinental migrants coming from Africa and Asia. And people are just in a holding pattern right now. And I think something that philanthropy misses about the immigration issue is like, it is a cross-border issue. It is a transnational issue. As much as we want to defend everyone against deportation, that is not the reality. Most people who are detained will be deported, right? And right now, most people who are trying to seek protection in the United States cannot do it. And so I want philanthropy to understand that just putting money into the United States doesn't address the full scope of this issue. Just in particular, I'll just close by mentioning again our LGBTQ migrant brothers and sisters. The US has cut almost all of the funding supporting shelters, medical care, HIV medication, et cetera, in Latin America. So people are really struggling right now. People who were about to seek safety in the United States are there with the roof over their head is at risk. They're not getting their medication. It's really bad right now on the Mexican side of the border. And then I already talked about all of the kind of family separation and trauma that comes with deportation, and the fact that that population is also straddling both sides of the border. So just really reminding philanthropy that the investment can not only be in the United States if we're going to confront this issue holistically.
That's a great point, and thank you for making it. Mayra, the gaps that you see, and you bring also as part of Immigrants Rising, an organization that's a national organization, some of the context and putting California and the California experience into the context of the national experience. Where do you see the gaps, and what would your message to philanthropy be about being strong allies and some of the ways that they can be more effective?
I'm going to put myself as an example. I am a product of the work of Immigrants Rising. I was fully undocumented for over 20 years. And while I was getting my master's degree and accumulating hours to become a licensed marriage and family therapist, Immigrants Rising provided educational resources, career resources, and entrepreneurial resources. So thanks to all of the resources that they provided while I was doing all of that work, I was able to become a licensed marriage and family therapist. And then I transitioned into adjusting my status. But what I want to emphasize is that I am that direct product. And in that same way, we're helping others because, as you know, there's no such thing as federal funding. There's no financial aid for undocumented students. The mental health program within Immigrants Rising started with no funding at all. It was run by volunteers. And then up to this year, we have some unrestricted funding that allowed us to expand. And this is the first year that we have some allocated funding for the mental health program. But the reality is that it's not enough. We need more in order for us to be able to support undocumented student population and beyond. We need more funding. As Luz mentioned, unrestricted multi-year funding, it's extremely important for us to be able to continue to do our work. Again, we are at capacity. We're passionate about what we do, but because of that, we are stretching ourselves thin, and we need more capacity. We need more funding. We need you to see that sometimes passion is not enough. Our community members or our leaders are burning themselves out, and we're not going to be able to accomplish much once we're burned out. So there needs to be support for more people to be able to do this work. There needs to be more funding for us to continue the work that we're doing so that there are more stories like mine that are able to thrive regardless of their immigration status.
Thank you for sharing that. And the hour flies by every time when we do these town halls, and we're almost at time. But I just wanted to ask y'all, because I think all of us are feeling this climate of fear and of hate, of bigotry, of targeting, especially vulnerable people, and especially undocumented immigrants, and asylum seekers and others. If I could just ask y'all, in 30 seconds or less, like, where do you find your optimism, your inspiration? Like, what's keeping you going right now? And I'll just start with Luz.
Thank you. Well, what's keeping me going is my conscience in our community. I think there's needs to be more moral conscience among those that lead our country. But what I do want to say is that we in California have to continue to work in unity and be bold together to protect the well-being of our state and our country's most vulnerable immigrant farm worker communities. Because if our immigrant workforce and their families are not well, safe, and thriving, our economy is going to suffer. So if we, working on the ground on the daily, we're seeing farm workers, that are struggling and have struggled to keep their families fed and housed. And now it's hurting them even more. So if our farm workers that are harvesting the food for all are not well, neither is our food system. So I think it's something about a conscience for all of us. But for those that think about money, it's going to hurt our bottom line if our immigrant communities we're not taking care of our immigrant communities.
Thank you. Jesus, where do you find the optimism these days?
When CIVIC was created, since CIVIC was created in 2014, we followed a model of regional coordination and collaboration in order to have the greatest possible impact on behalf of immigrant families that we work with. That has enabled us to organize hundreds of immigration legal services workshops, to serve hundreds of immigrants also through our immigrant entrepreneurship work. And in this very difficult time, as mentioned a few minutes ago, we found that there are so many organizations that also want to be part of these efforts and to collaborate with us and with other partners. So that enthusiasm, that willingness to be part of this alliance on behalf of immigrants in the Central Valley, I think is extremely motivating. It's what drives us to also continue our own work and to feel that we are trying to make a difference in helping immigrant families in our region. So that spirit of collective work, of joining forces, is what keeps us moving forward.
Thank you. Erika?
I don't know if I'm driven by optimism as much as rage most of the time. I think for me, I've spent decades working in detention facilities, and I know all of us are shocked by the news that immigrants are being sent to Guantanamo, but I want everyone to realize we have tent facilities on the California border, and we have detention facilities with horrific conditions where people are dying all the time. And so we have to be just as angry about that. And we have to keep working so that we can shut those places down and not allow those to be, in our state or anywhere else in the United States. But the one thing that really does give me the most optimism is working with a lot of our Mexican team, who are mostly deportees and refugees themselves. And they are really the embodiment of the success story that can happen post-deportation. I think a lot of folks think of deportation as the end of the line, but I've seen people build amazing lives in their countries of origin. And, since we can't stop every deportation, we need to also focus on giving folks who have been deported a chance at a new life. And so seeing that in real life, in real time, and working with people who've been through that experience really does give me a lot of hope.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, and for the candor of what's driving you right now, but even as you do maintain some optimism. And Mayra?
I think channeling rage is extremely important, and I love doing that as well. For me, what gives me hope and keeps me going is knowing that there's people like my dad, who was undocumented for almost 40 years, and he was a chingon his entire life, working in the fields, working in constructions, doing what he had to do to give us a better life. He passed away a few months ago. And my mom, who's still a chingona, who gets up every day and helps us, motivate us, and who shows so much support towards us. She's still undocumented, and she's, like I said, she's a chingona, and my siblings who grew up being undocumented, and one of my siblings got deported, and still keeping moving forward, because there is so much to life that we can live for, that we can hope for, and seeing so many of our community members living every day con poquito miedo, pero siguiendo siendo chingones, Like, yeah, there's still a little bit of fear, but they're still like so badass, and they continue to move forward regardless of what's happening. So seeing that, it's what is keeping me with hope and allowing me to continue to do my work every day.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And sorry to hear about your father's passing. In the 2 minutes left, let me just close by saying again, gracias. Thank you to each and every one of you. Part of what gives me hope and makes me optimistic is you and the work that you and your organizations are doing to serve our immigrant communities throughout the state of California. The experience, the compassion, the heart, the integrity that you bring to that work. And this conversation has been wonderfully informative. I hope that the folks watching share this. What I heard was, of course, we have right now this tremendous amount of fear and anxiety and worry out there, and an administration that's sending out a message of hate and of cracking down and trying to deport, probably with the goal of getting people to deport themselves and to make life miserable. But there are very real and concrete ways that these organizations are helping to provide not only comfort, but also legal assistance and other assistance to immigrants in their great time of need. These are very effective organizations that are rooted in their community. And we had a good conversation about what some of the gaps are and how philanthropy should be thinking about filling those gaps right now and in the months and years to come, because we know that this is a long-term endeavor. And, and as was mentioned, it's definitely more intense right now, but this issue of deportations and targeting of immigrant communities doesn't just happen, in one particular 4-year period. We also heard about the need for philanthropy to be flexible and to be listening partners to organizations. So I hope that this has been a good opportunity for folks to listen and to learn. I know it has been for me. And the Latino Community Foundation thanks each and every one of you for your work. We're proud to be your partners. And thank you for joining us today as we all work together, hopefully united, to do what we can for these very vulnerable, but also very powerful and needed people who are here in the United States contributing to our forward progress. Thank you.